welcome to Amrita by the Book. My name is Amrita and I am delighted to be back for Tag Tuesday with the Omnivore Book Tag. I was tagged to do this by Rosie, who is having a bit of a tag season on her channel, and I'm going to link down to her video down below so that she can explain more. But you should definitely go check it out and subscribe and turn on your notifications because it's going to be a fun January over on her channel, I think. I'm really happy that she tagged me on this one because it's pretty different in concept from pretty much every other tag. It is at once really easy but also really comprehensive. So the concept is that you choose 4 genres that you love and you're free to drill down to subcategories, and then you talk about your favorite example from that genre plus the book that you are reading or have just finished reading, as well as the book that you are going to read from your TBR in that genre next. Wait, did that sentence make sense? It will when I do the tag. My first pick for favorite genre is memoir. I love memoirs. I love that you can basically get a window into not just people's lives, but their psyches and their thought processes and their emotional lives by reading memoirs. I know it can get a little bit self-complacent and congratulatory when some people do it, but a good memoirist is able to not just investigate themselves and their reaction to the world, but the world itself. And it doesn't need to be preachy or self-satisfied. It can be fun, it can be funny, it can be poignant. It can be so many different emotions, and I love the genre. Now, I'm not very good at just picking favorites, as you're going to see throughout this video, but I do want to talk about My Invented Country by Isabel Allende, which is a book that I've discussed before, but Isabel Allende is perhaps one of the best writers living, and she writes a variety of things, and this particular book is her memoir of growing up as a Chilean and living through some really tumultuous times in her country's history, as well as her journey as a writer. And when I read this, I was perhaps about 21 years old, and I made a huge bore of myself. I would just carry around my copy of a book and read out passages to people because it felt like every single page or every other paragraph had something that was so intimate and so true and so relatable to me that I just was so taken aback, and I wondered if everybody felt the same way. And spoiler alert, nobody did. But I do like to think that I introduced a lot of people to her writing and that perhaps more people picked up a copy of this book, which I have a feeling is not as popular as her works of fiction, which, that's how nonfiction works mostly. But if you are interested in the genre at all, or if you are thinking about picking up a piece of memoir for the first time, I highly recommend Isabel Allende's My Invented Country. Because even if you're not interested in the genre as such, the prose is so beautiful and she writes so beautifully that I think it must be of interest to everybody. Is this my bias talking? 100%. Next is a memoir that I just finished reading. Well, I read this a little while ago, but I haven't read a lot of nonfiction over the past year for 2020 reasons. But the last memoir that I read was Ali Wong's Dear Girls. For those of you who don't know, Ali Wong is a comedian. She was a breakout star on Netflix when she did these 2 back-to-back comedy specials, and they were insane. Like, she was this tiny Asian pregnant woman saying the most hilarious and filthy things that anybody has ever said, and she was just, she was like born to be an internet meme. But she's also an actor, and last year I think, because I can't remember what time is anymore. But I think it was last year that she came out with this rom-com for Netflix called Always Be My Maybe. And it was such a boss move because she cast Daniel Day Kim as her ex, and then as Keanu Reeves as himself, who is just simping for her. And then she had Randall Park as her childhood sweetheart and love interest. And it is really funny, and it is also really sweet because it's about two people who find a community within each other and inspire each other to do better than they perhaps might have had they not known each other. Dear Girls is basically a collection of essays that are addressed to her two daughters, and in it she's just so honest. I mean, she's funny, obviously, she's a comedian, but she also has this voice, and I've mentioned this before, that some people, especially people who write for television or people who are celebrities in another field where they need to use their voice and their, by voice I don't mean like literally their voice, but like, their style and their writing voice. It doesn't always translate well to the written form because books require you to write a certain way. And when you write it the way that you speak, sometimes it works, but mostly it doesn't. You need to be really talented and have a specific ear to translate the two. And Ali Wong has that. She's able to be herself, and you can hear her voice. Like if you've watched her comedy specials, then you know that this is 100% Ali Wong, but it somehow translates as a book as well. And it's full of, her experiences as a petite, attractive Asian woman who is on the comedy circuit and what that is like for her. And it's so different from the rest of her peers. And she talks about the importance of failing. She talks about what it was like to meet her husband and how, what a healthy marriage looks like. And she's just, she doesn't have a lot of things that she likes to keep private. I imagine there are things that she does keep private, and I imagine that there is a persona of Ali Wong versus, Ali Wong herself. But she straddles that line of authenticity really well, and I really enjoyed it. Like, her life is so different from mine, but it was, this is why memoirs are great. They give you a window into a completely different world, even though both of you might be living contemporaneously in the same world, so to speak. Next is the memoir that I hope to read, and that is a book that's coming out at the end of January, and it's called Unfinished by Priyanka Chopra. And I'll be honest, I don't expect this book to be very good, but I still have a lot of hope for it to have, all the gossip that I am interested in, because Priyanka, for those of you who only know her from her American career, Priyanka was one of the biggest stars in Bollywood. She still is for, 2 decades at this point. And she worked with A-list stars, she worked with B-list stars. She really went through the entire process of climbing the ladder. And I can only imagine that she has so much to say about all the things that went on behind the scenes, and she must have a unique perspective into the industry because she wasn't born into it. She's not Bollywood royalty or anything, but she really worked her way up the ladder. So I can only imagine that she has a lot of things to say, but she's also really good at being diplomatic, and she doesn't always want to set off little fires everywhere. So I expect it to be rather mealy-mouthed, to be honest. I expect her to be as complimentary as possible, but there's a little bit of hope in me that she has left her Bollywood career far behind enough. And now that she is settled down in the United States and she has a Jonas brother for her husband, she hopefully doesn't care as much about, if people back in Bombay will be mad at her. So maybe she can talk about a few people as honestly as I would love to hear her speak. My next genre is historical romance. I love historical romance. That's why I made the video about Bridgerton and, a whole bunch of other things as well. And my favorite historical romance, like I really thought about it for a really long time, and I knew that it had to be something written by Georgette Heyer. I have gushed at great length about her, and I have also talked about how problematic she is, but you know what? Like, she is the literal best when it comes to Regency romances. And my favorite of her novels has to be Venetia. This is kind of like choosing your favorite child. Like, it's really hard for me to say, oh, Venetia. And if you come and talk to me next week, I might just say something else. But Venetia is one of those books that I reread every year. I love it. I love everything about it. I love the characters. I love the conflict. I love the setup. I love that Damerel is supposed to be a rake, but really he's not. He's just a nonconformist who just wants to do what he wants to do and not be bothered. And literally everybody is up his ass telling him like, oh, you're like a debauched rake because you won't do the things that we want you to do. And really he's just a kind, sweet man who just wants to be left alone to do whatever it is that he wants to do. And I love Venetia, who is similarly just trying to find a bit of humor in the life that she's leading. And she doesn't have a sense of being unfulfilled or lonely or anything. And then one day she meets Damerel and she realizes, oh, so this is what it feels like to have a best friend. Somebody who will be your support, who will be there for you, who will have your back when lesser men try to persecute you. And it's really lovely to see the relationship between them, even when Damerel's being an idiot and noble and self-sacrificing. Why do men in romance novels always try to do that? I mean, it never works out. Don't be noble and self-sacrificing. Fight for your girl. Anyway, Venetia is funny, it is charming. I love both Venetia and Damerel, and I will defend the honor of this one book to my dying breath. A historical romance that I just finished is The Sugared Game by K.J. Charles. This is the sequel to Slippery Creatures and is the second of a trilogy. And I believe the third one is coming out later in 2021, and I am so excited for it. So on the one hand, you have Will, who is this, big, mean, fighting machine, but is actually just a cuddly little bear, and he has just come back from the First World War, and he is wounded in spirit. He had to murder a lot of people and he didn't really want to do it. He has a sense of having been wronged by his government, who sent him off to fight this war that had no point. All of this is set up in Slippery Creatures, which is book 1. And at the time, like after he inherits his bookstore, he discovers that he's also inherited a bit of a mystery as well as a thriller from his uncle. And in the process of solving it, he runs into Kim, who is this mysterious nobleman who is also working for the government and is basically a sociopath, but a really attractive one. And Will and Kim, they can't keep their hands off each other, but also Kim is marching to his own beat, like he has his own pressures, and he has to basically betray Will, like that's his whole thing. And Will is just trying to trust Kim, but he just, how many times can a man be betrayed and still want to boink the guy? And Will and Kim are going to find out. The historical romance that I would like to read next is Wicked and the Wallflower by Sarah MacLean. Now, I've read Sarah MacLean before a very long time ago, I think. But I haven't read this series, and in the wake of Bridgerton coming out, everybody was talking about how people should be reading this series and how it's got like an edge to it and how it's also really sexy and fun, and I like all of those things. So I am looking forward to it very much. Thank you. My next genre is adult fantasy, and you know what my favorite adult fantasy series is. It's The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. It is epic, it is huge. I grew up reading it. It took me 20, 30 years to finish. Basically, however long it took Jordan and his estate to finish the book, that's how long it took for me to finish the books. And I love them. I reread them. I love the characters. My favorites are my all-time favorites. I like the pace of the story, except for the ones in the middle, which, nobody really likes. But I like the details. I love the way that he paid so much attention to all the tiny things that a lot of people would just skip through. And I don't care if that makes a lot of people mad now that they're adapting it to a series over on Amazon Prime. Plug. I bet everyone's really glad that he spent a few pages discussing how people bathed in Andor, because if there's ever a scene in which people have to bathe in Andor, they just need to go and reference the books. The adult fantasy that I'm reading right now is The Goblin Emperor by Sarah Monette. I actually began this a few weeks ago, I think, but I got interrupted by a couple of other things that I needed to finish for book club and other things. So it's been on the back burner for a bit, but I finished maybe like 3 chapters and I really liked it. I think it's going to be like one of those things where you have a novice that is thrust into extraordinary circumstances and then needs to somehow overcome and become the badass that they're destined to be. And also, I don't read a lot of things about goblins, so I'm really interested to see what this world is going to look like, because it's completely new to me. And the next adult fantasy book that I hope to read is called Inda by Sherwood Smith. This is a book that was recommended to me by, I think it was Sophia, and she's great. And she said that I might really enjoy this because I have a fondness for fantasy that's set in either Japan or for Japan. And I like that old school vibe, So she said that that's what Inda is like, and I saw the cover and I knew that she was absolutely correct. So I bought it immediately, but I haven't gotten around to reading it because my TBR is always so giant and I always have so many things going on at the same time. But now I feel like I've gotten to a space where I can make space for it. So I'm really looking forward to that. Right, for my last genre, I chose cozy mystery. Now, this is a genre that I grew up reading, so I had to really think long and hard about what is my favorite. I think it has to be something by Agatha Christie, just because she was the first mystery writer that I read. And I devoured all her books one summer, and I think perhaps my favorite of hers is And Then There Were None. It's either that or Death on the Nile. I really like both of those. But I'm going to go with And Then There Were None just because I had no idea what was happening. And I really enjoyed coming to the end of it and just going like, what? What happened? Christie puts the cozy in cozy murder mystery for me. Like, she is my fallback and my comfort watch. I watch Poirot all the time whenever I need a pick-me-up, or when, like my head is too loud for me, like I can't focus on anything, then I will literally put on something by Christie or just read something by Christie and I will immediately feel much better. A cozy murder mystery that I just finished reading is The Moonflower Murders by Anthony Horowitz, which is a sequel to, I believe it's called Magpie Murders. And Anthony Horowitz, for those of you who don't know, is the brain behind some of the most classic, beloved British murder mystery series, such as Midsummer Murders and Foyle's War and things like that. Like a really weird and varied set of TV shows, and I guess he started writing murder mysteries as well. And it's a good book. Like, I enjoyed reading it. It definitely isn't my favorite. Like, it's not going to be anywhere near my favorite, like say the Thursday Murder Club has been, since I read it in December of 2020. But I do think it's competently written, And Horowitz does this thing where the main clue for the murder in this book is actually a book. So you have the main book, and then in the middle of the main book you have another book, like a shorter full-length novel that is written in a completely different voice with completely different characters. And you're basically supposed to read that because that's what the main character of the overall book is doing in an effort to understand the murder that took place in real life. It sounds more complicated than it is. When you pick it up, it makes perfect sense. And finally, the book that I think I'm going to pick up next in this genre is called Dead in Dublin by Katie Murphy. And this is a recommendation by a friend whose recommendations I generally trust. And it is described as a charming Irish murder mystery, and I don't know anything more about it because with books that are recommended to me by my friends, I tend to not want to know too much about it. I like to just soak it in, completely new. And when it comes to murder mysteries in particular, I like to go in completely blind and leave it up to the author to set things up and explain things to me, because I'm not spoiler averse as such. Like, you can tell me spoilers of TV shows or whatever, it doesn't really matter. I grew up reading the ending of books, and I still do, really, because you know what, like, if the ending is crap, the book is going to be crap. Like, this is one of my firmly held beliefs. Like, if the book does not stick the landing, then the book is not going to be any good. Like, it doesn't matter if there's a 600-page book and 550 pages of it are amazing, and then the last 50 are just like, ew, what was that? It's going to ruin the entire feel of the book for me. So I'm not spoiler averse as such, but I do like, in my old age, to just go in and let something surprise me if it can. Just because, I don't know, it just feels good to me now. Right, so that was my tag, and I think this is fun and this is easy, and I am going to tag a few people to do it. Number one is Lady Jane Books, and I think that's going to be fun because she talks mostly about horror and crime, and I want to see what she's going to come up with for the other two genres. So that's going to be fun. I'm also tagging Jeremy Fee just because I think that he's one of the people who does read widely. I'm gonna tag a Polynesian reader because I'd just like to see what she has to offer. I'm tagging Moonlight Scrolls, whom I love. And lastly, I'm tagging Katya, whom I haven't seen do tags, I don't think. So I don't know if she hates them, but anyway, check out all of their channels, and Katya, if you do like to do a tag, consider yourself tagged for this one. Thank you all for watching, and as always, if you have any recommendations for any of these genres, things that you think that I would enjoy reading, or things that you think I should discuss more, let me know because I always want to hear from you.